Hello students, welcome back once again to my YouTube class. Today we are going to learn chapter number 12, producing and storing food. We know that different types of food are taken by us and many other different organisms. We know this food has become very important for our survival. We get this food from both plants as well as animals. Most of the food that we take, it comes from the side of plants. So today we are going to discuss how these foods are produced from the side of plants, how the plants are able to produce the food, and we have this food. We know that all those plants that are grown for our use, okay, they are known as crops. So we know that many plants are used by us, okay, many different plants which grows different crops. Some crops are grown for the production of food and some crops are grown for commercial purposes. So those crops that are specially grown for the production of for the production of food, they are called as food crops. And those plants that are grown for commercial purposes, okay, not for the production of food, they are called as cash crops. They are called as cash crops. So all crops are not grown for food. So all, like cotton and all, cotton, jute, these are some of the crops which are not grown for the production of food. So they are called cash crops. And likewise, many other plants you will get, rubber, coffee, like and all. Okay, these are all considered as cash crops. Many things we need to do to let the crop grow well. So we know that different crops are grown in different parts of the world or different types of soil. Okay, different crops, they need different kinds of soil, different amounts of water, and likewise many different things. So to let the crops grow well, some of the general steps need to be taken so that the crops grow well. So we are going to discuss the general steps, okay, which has to be taken by us to let the crops grow well. Firstly, we have got ploughing. What is mean by ploughing? Ploughing is a process of digging the soil. Okay, it's a process of digging the soil and making the soil loose and airy. We know generally if the soil is not loose, then it will be quite tough for us to sow the seeds. So first the soil has to be digged out and made the soil loose and airy. Okay, so we know that in olden days people didn't have such advanced machines that we have nowadays, like tractors and all. Okay, they used to do the ploughing of the field or the place where they need to grow the crops, okay, by using cattle and all, cattle as buffaloes and cows. They used to do the ploughing. But nowadays in many of the places we see, instead of using the cattle for doing the ploughing of the field, okay, we use tractors and many other agricultural tools to do the ploughing. Using the tractors, it becomes very easy for a farmer to do the ploughing. Okay, within a short time, he is able to plough the field and make the soil loose and airy. Because of ploughing the field, what happens? The roots of the plant are able to go deep under the soil to absorb water and minerals, and the plant is able to grow well. Okay. Second step that we need to follow right after ploughing is improving soil fertility. We know that once the crops are grown in the same field, okay, throughout the year, what happens? The soil loses its fertility or its nutrients and the plant doesn't grow well. So what we need to do is that we need to add up some nutrients to the soil so that the plant gets it from the soil at the time of growing and the plant grows well. So we need to improve the fertility of the soil by adding up different fertilizers, okay, that we get it from the industries or that are made artificially, okay. Man-made fertilizers can be used, as well as we can also use manures such as cow dungs or the dungs that we get from different animals, okay, as a manure, and the left out plant materials as a residue. The left out plant materials, which we call as a residue, crop residues, can be added up to the soil to improve the fertility of the soil and making the soil improve with fertility. The plant is able to grow well, okay, with available nutrients. Nextly, we have got the third step as sowing the seeds. Right after plugging, we need to improve the fertility of the soil. We have improved, and the third step that we need to follow is to sow the seeds. Now we have learned that we have already improved the fertility of the soil. Now what is the thing that we need to do is that we need to sow the seeds on the soil. Okay, while sowing the seeds, we can sow the seeds using different machines which were available nowadays, which are known as seed drills. Okay, seeds are sown after the soil is prepared. Seeds can be scattered over the fields by hand. So if the seeds are very small in size, then it can be scattered over the field, like the cereal plants, rice, grains and all, okay, or wheat and all. Such plants, as the seeds are very small in size, it can be scattered over the field by hand, manually. We can sow some of the seeds which are a little bit bigger in size using our hands, and we can also use machines like seed drills, okay, which are always found attached with the plugs. That means along with the plugging, the seeds can be sown. So such machines we can use for sowing the seeds. Nextly, we have got the fourth step as irrigation. Once the seeds are sown to the field, what happens is that after some weeks or after some months or after some days, we can say, the plant starts growing. As the plant starts growing, what happens is that the plant is able to get the nutrients from the soil, but it requires water. So what we need to do is that we know that the nature irrigates most of the crops by bringing rainfall, but the water that the crops gets through nature by rainfall is not enough for the plant. So many a times we need to irrigate the crops by giving water to the plants. Okay, so irrigation, the word itself, it means that watering the crops. So we can irrigate the crops from various sources like rivers, lakes, wells and ponds. So the water that has to be carried from different water bodies like rivers, lakes, ponds and wells through pipes. Okay, nowadays if you happen to visit any fields, you might see that pipes are attached to each and every fields which carries the water from different water bodies like rivers, lakes, ponds, and we know that the waters are again carried out from the wells even, that is the underground water. Okay, there are many other ways of irrigating the crop fields. It can be allowed to run freely on the field. For example, you can see the picture which is given in your text, okay, what is called as drip irrigation. So this drip irrigation is a process of irrigating the crop fields by the pipes, by making small holes on the pipe. Okay, what happens once the water starts flowing through the pipe, the water used to come out through the holes of the pipe throughout the field. Okay, what happens, the water gets flooded, or the field is able to get the water everywhere. So such a way of irrigating the crops is known as drip irrigation. Likewise, many other ways are there which you will come to learn when you will go to your next class. Okay, the process of irrigating the crops or watering the crops. After the water has been given to the crops, we are able to see that the crops are growing bigger and bigger, and it starts bearing flowers, and lastly we happen to see that it starts growing the food crops. So at that time, when the plant starts giving out crops or growing out crops, at that time what we need to do is that we need to take up another step, is to protect the crops. Protection of crops needs to be taken. We know mostly in the crop fields where foods are grown, many other animals which we call as grazers, cows, goats, buffaloes and all, these animals, what they used to do is that they used to move from place to place in search of food. So these animals, by mistake, if they happen to enter any crop fields, okay, they will eat up all the crops by destroying most of the plants. And not only these grazers, okay, we get many other birds, okay, which used to destroy the crops. So we need to take protection of the crops so that the crops grow well. Okay, so some of the steps that we need to take up for the production of the crops is using of pesticides. We know different pests like birds, insects and many other organisms which causes destruction to the crops, okay, stays away from the crops plant if pesticides are sprayed on the crop fields. Okay, like Bagon and Heat, we know these are some of the pesticides which always helps us to get rid of mosquitoes, cockroaches and all. Likewise, different pesticides are available in the market which can be used in the crop fields to get rid of the organisms like birds, rats and all, okay, to get rid of the crop fields. Unwanted plants, we know these unwanted plants are known as weeds. If we walk around on the street or any of the crop fields, we may happen to notice many unwanted plants growing on the crop fields. So these unwanted plants are known as weeds. So these unwanted plants, when it happens to grow along with the crop plants, what happens is that it leads to the shortage of nutrients for the plant. So as a result, the crop plant doesn't get sufficient nutrient and is not able to grow well. So what we need to do is that we need to remove these unwanted plants which are called as weeds from the crop fields. So sometimes many of the farmers, what they used to do is that they used to remove these unwanted plants called as weeds from the crop fields manually with their hands. And if the crop field is very large enough, that means the farming has been done in large scale, at that time the farmers, what they used to do is that they don't remove the unwanted plants manually, but they use a kind of chemical, okay, use a chemical which is known as weedicides. So these weedicides are certain chemicals, okay, which helps to get rid of the unwanted plants. So these farmers, they used to spray these weedicides on the crop fields to get rid of the unwanted plants. Okay, so these are some of the ways or steps that we need to take up to protect the crops. Pesticides, it is useful for the crop fields, but we know that there is again a bad side of the using of pesticides. Even though pesticides helps the crop fields or the crop plants to get rid of the pests, birds, rats and all, okay, but it has got a bad side, that is it is a non-biodegradable substance. The chemicals that we find in pesticides, these are non-biodegradable. That means it does not get decomposed at all by any way. We know many of the things that we have which are living, after it dies it gets decomposed, but pesticides and many other plastic materials, okay, we know it doesn't get decomposed at all because these are non-biodegradable substances. If you go on using these pesticides in large quantity in the crop fields, it will protect the crops from the pests, but it will remain on the soil as it is, as it will not get decomposed at all. And at the time when rainfall may take place, okay, the chemicals that we find in the pesticides, they get run off to different water bodies, and it leads to eutrophication. It leads to eutrophication. That means the organisms living in the water bodies, including the aquatic plants and the aquatic organisms, the fishes and all, okay, they lose their lives. Why they lose their lives? Because we know these aquatic organisms, they are able to get their needs from the water itself, as they are what? Adapted to live in water. So these aquatic organisms, they lose their lives as they are not able to breathe at all. Okay, the level of oxygen in water gets decreased. So these are some of the bad sides of using pesticides. Lastly, we have another step, that is harvesting. We know that after the crops are grown, what we do, we no more let the crop remain on the crop field. We used to gather each and every crops that bears into fruit or that bears into fibers and all, okay, whether it is a cash crop or a food crop, okay. After the crops gives its fruit, after it is completely grown, we gather the crops and bring it to our homes. So the farmers, what they used to do, they even do the same thing. They start cutting and gathering all the crops, okay. They start cutting and gathering all the crops and they collect it and they bring it to their homes. After bringing it to their homes, some of the food crops, as we know, cereals like rice, wheat, pulses and all, okay, such crops has to be what? Undergone threshing and all. Like you might have seen nearby your houses, or some of you might have seen in your homes even, that once it is gathered and collected, it is brought to your homes and threshing is done on the crops, on such crops which bear cereals as rice, grains and all. In olden days, when there were no machines like tractors and all, okay, or threshers and all, at that time some kettles were used to undergo the threshing. But nowadays we find these machines are mostly used to undergo the threshing. In this threshing process, what happens is that the grain is separated out from the crops that has been gathered. We know along with the crop plants, the grain is the most important part of the plant which is required by us. Only for getting the grain only, the crop has been grown. So the grain has been separated out in the process of threshing, and then we find different other residues of the crop plant after the separation of the grain. So these residues are separated out from the grain by undergoing another process that is known as winnowing. Many a times we see in our homes, or we happen to see in our neighbors, that after undergoing the threshing, after the grain has separated, you use a kind of tink, okay, for what? Separating the grain from the residues as husks and all. You all know that means the lighter part, lighter impurity or lighter residue, has been separated out from the heavier grain by undergoing a winning process. In winning process, the wind is allowed to blow in one side and a lady or a man has to throw out the grain containing the residues, okay, from in the direction in which the wind is blowing. So what happens is that at the time when the grain containing the residues of husks and all are thrown, getting the wind, the lighter impurities of husks, like husks and all, okay, they fall little bit apart from the grain, and the heavier part of the crop plant, okay, that is the grain, it falls directly downwards. In this way, winning process is done to separate the grain from the lighter impurities of the crops. Okay, so these are some of the general steps that we need to follow or take up to let the crops grow well. And lastly, after the crops has been collected, what we need to do? Many of us, we don't have the habit of what? Collecting such crops, as most of our parents are not farmers. They simply used to buy from the market and all, and they used to feed you by cooking and all. But especially the farmers, what they used to do after harvesting and after the collection of and gathering of all the foods, they used to store these foods. So storing and carrying, these are the two steps that we need to take up at last to let the food to be stored for long time use. So how do we store the food? Different types of foods we get from the crops. So all the foods can't be stored in the same way. For example, take chili. We know we are able to get green chili as well as red chili from the market, or the dry chili. So you might have seen the green chili can't be stored for long time. We can keep it inside the refrigerator for some days, but after some days it gets spoiled. But if we talk about the red chili, it can be stored throughout the year. So how this red chili is stored throughout the year? That is the dry one, by drying. Likewise, many other fruits, dry fruits, you know, kismis, almond, okay, kaju. Likewise, many food items we get which can be stored by drying under sunlight. Okay. Secondly, we can store these foods by storing it in cool storages. The vegetables and all that we are able to get throughout the year, even if we don't have the season of that very vegetable or the fruits and all. How is it possible? It is only possible because such fruits like apple, banana, mango, okay, likewise many different fruits we get from the market. Even though it is not a season, we are able to get it throughout the year. It is only because such fruits at the time when it has been grown and it is stored in refrigerators or cool storages. So we are able to get it throughout the year. Okay, and the last process of storing some of the foods is by canning. This canning is a process of storing food. In this process, what happens is that food is first heated to kill the microorganisms present in the food. Okay, then it is packed in airtight cans or bottles so that the microorganisms cannot enter it from the air. Okay, we happen to get many food items under cans. For example, mackerel, sardines. These are some of the foods as fishes and all are stored. Sardines, mackerel, you might have got it in your home. Sometimes your father has brought from purchasing from the market. talking about different types of pickles. We get mixed pickles or chili pickles or mango pickles. Likewise, different types of pickles also we get under bottles. Okay, and we also get different food items like paneer, okay, honey, okay, or we can say jams, jellies. Likewise, all the different types of food that we are able to get it every now and then can also be stored in cans. And to undergo the canning of the foods, what has to be done is that the food has to be heated at high temperature to kill the microorganisms present in the food. And lastly, it is packed in airtight cans so that no microorganisms can enter it from the air. In this way, my students, we are able to store different types of food by canning. So hope that you all have understood and catch up with all the topics that I have discussed today. If you have any queries or doubts in any of the topics, please call me every night between 8 to 10. I shall make clarification of your doubts. With this, your class gets over. Thank you. Have a nice day.